Once our ancestors had abandoned the hunter-gatherer way of life after discovering agriculture, and their nomadic camps had been transformed into sedentary communities, little by little, we humans gradually lost the close contact we had with nature and the animal species that accompany us on this fabulous journey called life. Nevertheless, not all men and women set down roots in the earth. Shepherds continued to wander in search of fresh pasture lands to feed their flocks. During the long days that they spent in the fields taking care of their animals, they had the chance to continue observing wild species in their natural habitat, to get to know them in great detail, and to discover the relationships that they established not only amongst themselves, but also with domestic animals. Few artifacts remain to tell us about those tough men who worked in the natural landscape and acquired deep knowledge of the world around them. During the long hours of solitude next to their herds, the most skillful of them created unique and fascinating objects of everyday use, and some of them are quite beautiful. This surprising drinking horn was carved from a cow's horn in the late 19th century by a shepherd. The only things we know about him are his name, Inacio Lucas, and that he lived in one of the villages in the foothills of Spain's central mountain system, in the heart of the Iberian Peninsula. This drinking horn documents not only domestic animals, but also more than 15 perfectly recognizable wild animal species. Even though the shepherd only used his knife to carve the animals in simple line drawings, he portrayed them with great realism. As if it were a field notebook, this lovely bestiary offers us an opportunity to learn about the surroundings in which this humble shepherd lived more than 100 years ago. A world that we invite you to explore, a world where the frontier between the domesticated and the wild is hard to distinguish. Bestiary, a shepherd's legacy. When our ancestors acquired the ability to use symbols, a few simple lines became enough to represent the world around them. These symbols, which we have breathed life into and given meaning, have been used by mankind for thousands of years, not only to make artistic creations, but also to decorate countless objects of everyday use. Numerous examples of artistic personal objects made of stone, bone, and ivory have survived from the Paleolithic to our times. Unfortunately, objects made from perishable organic materials like wood or animal horns have not survived, although they certainly must have been quite common. The horns which the people of the Paleolithic used as drinking vessels, and which they probably decorated, must not have been very different from the ones made by the shepherds who have traveled the fields and interior mountains of the Iberian Peninsula for thousands of years. These vessels were made from the corneous sheath of chitin that covers the bony part of bovines' horns. This typical shepherd's utensil was used as a drinking glass to collect the milk obtained from their animals and as containers to carry food or liquids, among other uses. One clear example is this lovely piece of pastoral art made in the late 19th century by a shepherd named Inacio Lucas, which we know because he carved his name into it with his knife. Drinking horns were highly valued as personal objects for everyday use, and shepherds depicted all kinds of experiences and beliefs on them. Our humble shepherd drew a few religious symbols on it as a sort of amulet. In this way, he sought protection from natural disasters from figures such as the miraculous image of Our Lady of Nieva, the protector from thunder, earthquakes, and lightning. He also depicted scenes from daily life on the drinking horn, such as a cattle drover with his herd. a farmer with his donkey, and the soldiers who, riding their horses, surely must have dazzled the shepherd with their striking uniforms. What's more, as shepherds often did, Inacio Lucas depicted the domestic animals associated with rural communities. Considered noble and emblematic animals, horses have been closely linked to farming societies as draft animals and a means of transport. Humans have made use of the strength of cows and oxen to break up the soil with plows and to move heavy loads on carts. And faithful dogs not only provided company, but also were indispensable in driving and defending the herds. 2 goats also appear among the animals that Inacio Lucas carved on his drinking horn. Curiously, however, we don't find any depictions of the most abundant domestic animal on the Iberian Peninsula, sheep. That's why it's quite likely that our shepherd was actually a goat herd, and that he spent a large part of his life driving his herd through the fields and mountains and watching over them as they grazed. For thousands of years, the hands of men have left their mark on the forests in the interior of the Iberian Peninsula. Besides plowing large expanses of land to grow grain, men gradually replaced the original Mediterranean forest with vast pasturelands dotted with scattered trees, thus creating a new ecosystem, the Dehesa. These new man-made landscapes reached their maximum extension in the 19th century, due to the fact that the constantly growing human population needed ever more food, firewood, and charcoal. Areas with poor or rocky soils that weren't very good to farm, as well as mountainous and steep terrains, continued to feature dense forests of oaks and other species of trees and shrubs, although they too were heavily exploited for logging and cattle raising. Despite the strong influence of mankind, the Iberian Peninsula is one of the places on the planet with the greatest variety of ecosystems, as well as amazing biodiversity. With a continental Mediterranean climate, the fields, forests, and rivers in the interior of the peninsula abound with food, and so numerous animal species have adapted to living in these rich surroundings. As Inacio Lucas led his herd to graze on shrubs in the steepest and most mountainous areas, he no doubt witnessed innumerable stories and anecdotes involving those animals that did not submit to human control. That is, the wild animals that he always carried with him on his drinking horn, a true field notebook created by a consummate naturalist. Around the Mediterranean, carnivores have traditionally been considered harmful species, but there is one animal in particular that humans raised to the category of a diabolical being: the wolf. The Iberian wolf, which in days of old was quite common, is a subspecies endemic to the Iberian Peninsula and is perfectly adapted to the warm climate of the Mediterranean forest. The Iberian wolf is smaller than its relatives in colder northern climes, and here it's hard to find an adult male that weighs more than 40 kilos. These extraordinary hunters, which learned that hunting is much more successful when carried out as a group, organize themselves in packs with complex social relationships. The packs in the Mediterranean ecosystem are small. They are generally composed of 2 reproductive alphas, the most recent wolf pups, and several adults or juveniles from previous litters. Despite being expert hunters, the hunt isn't always successful. When their stomachs start growling, they have no problem with looking for smaller prey, like voles, mice, or any other small mammals that cross their path. If the area occupied by the family group doesn't provide enough food, the young members leave the pack in search of their own territory, one that will offer them the hunting opportunities they need to survive and the chance to be able to create their own family. It is at this time when the young individuals, which usually have less experience in hunting wild prey, do the most damage to domestic herds. Ever since men learned how to domesticate animals, the wolf has been the eternal enemy to defeat. To protect their flocks, shepherds have always been accompanied by fierce mastiffs, as a well-defended and properly driven herd rarely suffers losses. Our shepherd depicted on his drinking horn a wolf pursuing one of its favorite prey. One might think that this carnivorous predator is chasing some defenseless sheep or goat, but the reality is different. In those places where the natural balance with available wild herbivores is maintained, deer form a large part of the wolf's diet. Red deer are the largest wild herbivores on the Iberian Peninsula. While the males boast lovely large horns during much of the year and can weigh more than 200 kilos, the females lack horns and look much slimmer, usually weighing less than 125 kilos. The does begin to be fertile in their 3rd year and will bear a single fawn every year, practically to the end of their life. Giving birth to 2 fawns is extremely rare, so when a doe is accompanied by 2 youngsters, it's very likely that the second one is adopted. Deer feed on a combination of grasses and the leaves of woody plants. In late summer, when the pasture's yellow, the does stand on their hind legs to eat the green leaves on the hulm oaks. And if they're lucky, they may even be able to reach some of the acorns that are beginning to ripen on the lower branches. The male's strategy is more energetic. They use their long horns to beat the branches and knock down the nutritious acorns packed with energy. They have to store energy reserves to prepare not only for the coming winter, but also for the arduous test that they will soon have to face and that can leave them exhausted: the rut. For a good part of the year, the deer live hidden in the dense forests, divided into small family groups normally made up of females with the offspring from the 2 previous years. The adult males gather in groups, governed by a strong linear hierarchy. When food begins to be scarce in late summer, however, the small groups of females begin to gather in the areas where the highest quality food is found. And the males, aware that the females will soon be in heat, also move towards those areas. When the first autumn rains come, the males start to demonstrate their prowess before potential rivals and to excite each other with their tremendous bellowing. Bellowing that can also cause the females to come into heat sooner. Although Iberian red deer are smaller than their relatives in more northern latitudes, the show that they put on every autumn is no less spectacular as they battle for the right to mate. It is without a doubt the most dramatic mating ritual performed in the Mediterranean forest in autumn. And our humble goatherd would have watched this show in all its splendor. The does, which were waiting anxiously for the start of the battles that would determine the father of their future young, observe closely the endless combat. The skirmishes between the dominant males turn the clearings into battlefields where the fighting lasts for hours. These clashes can even end in the death of one of the combatants from exhaustion or as a consequence of the wounds received in the heat of battle. The Mediterranean forest is the perfect habitat for an animal with bad eyesight, a great sense of smell, and extraordinary hearing. Worshipped by ancient Celtiberian warriors for their fearlessness and strength, only the most skilled hunters could manage to kill them, as their thick hide, a sort of armor, was hard to pierce. This formidable armored animal is the wild boar. Wild boars are hard to spot. Their bodies are covered with large, long bristles in brownish and blackish colors, perfect to hide in the dense forest. Wild boars love to take baths, and the more mud, the better. In addition to keeping their skin clean, the mud helps to protect them from parasites and the heat. This mammal adapts easily to any ecosystem. From mountainous areas to wetlands, wild boars manage to exploit efficiently the natural resources available wherever they live, even choosing the right foods to attain a balanced diet of animal and plant proteins. With their unbeatable sense of smell, they are able to detect food underground. Acorns, mushrooms, roots, insects, and little animals are their favorite dishes. And like many other opportunistic species, they don't turn their noses up at the remains of other dead animals. No doubt Inacio Lucas, while caring for his herd, was able to observe some hungry boar eating carrion, an experience that is sometimes hard to forget. That may very well be the reason for his portraying the wild boar in his bestiary with claws, just like other large carnivores such as the wolf, the dog, or the fox. If the wild boar hides in the dense forest to make it hard to spot him, the next species in our bestiary is even more difficult to see in broad daylight. With its elongated body, short legs, long furry tail that it uses to keep its balance, narrow head, tapering snout, wedge-shaped face, and relatively large eyes, the marten is a small and highly adaptable generalist carnivore that lives mainly in wooded areas with plenty of scrubland. Although the marten is usually nocturnal, in the spring and summer it may begin to patrol its territory several hours before nightfall and prolong its activity to a few hours after sunrise. Martens are solitary and don't tolerate well the presence of other inhabitants of the Mediterranean forest, avoiding all contact with them. This consummate hunter, safe in its den, will wait for the sun to go down to satisfy its hungry stomach. The plaintive hooting of the tawny owl announces that darkness is gaining ground on the light. Nighttime is coming once more, and all of the forest's inhabitants will have to fight for survival. The darkness is perfect for this deadly predator that feeds mainly on small rodents. Although it won't turn down an offer of small birds, insects, or even fruit in autumn and winter. Although this barn owl is no threat to the marten, it does compete with it in the search for its favorite food. A small mouse is poking around near the marten's den, which has to take advantage of the opportunity before the barn owl launches its deadly attack. Another of the hunters that hides in the darkness of night was brought from Africa by man more than 2,000 years ago. Besides having an excellent sense of smell, its hearing and eyesight are exceptional, senses that have allowed it to adapt perfectly to this ecosystem. The genet moves with feline agility, although it's not a cat. This clever carnivore is a vivarid that climbs trees with extraordinary agility and is able to penetrate thick underbrush with amazing ease. Genets are among the few mammals of their weight that can climb down a tree head first, an ability that enables them to look for food with great speed and maneuverability. And it is here, in the thick greenery, where it finds one of its favorite prey. The little birds that nest, seek refuge, or simply spend the night until daybreak. The genet's diet also includes small mammals like mice, dormice, small reptiles, and even fruits and berries if food is scarce. Inacio Lucas's bestiary also had to include one of the carnivorous species with the greatest ecological adaptation. Considered agile, quick-witted, intelligent, elusive, ingenious, and skilled at observing and anticipating its prey's moves, foxes owe their success to their ability to include all kinds of foods in their diet. Foxes incessantly look for small rodents, rabbits, hares, birds, and large invertebrates, as well as young roe deer and the offspring of other hoofed mammals. In autumn and winter, they supplement these foods with berries and wild fruits, and even with larvae and insects hiding under the bark of fallen trees. With their highly developed hearing and eyesight, they're always observing everything that happens around them. One never knows where danger is lurking. Although foxes have few natural predators, wolves and lynxes can kill them if they dare to enter their territories. This agile climber is inspecting all the holes in this downed tree. Who knows? A bite of food might be hiding in the place where one least expects it. Widely distributed throughout the Iberian Peninsula, this little canine isn't hard to see. They often frequent urban areas in search of food wastes thrown away by humans. Although foxes rarely attack adult sheep or goats, they won't hesitate to make off with a lamb or kid if they can use the darkness to their advantage and can find a weak spot where the herd is poorly protected by the guard dogs. That's why shepherds haven't been especially keen on hunting foxes. This tireless opportunist hardly ever keeps still and constantly moves from one area to another within its broad territory, and not just at night. It's also comfortable with patrolling the forests and fields in search of food in the daytime. But the fox always has to be on the lookout. One false step could have fatal consequences, and the hunter could become the quarry of the most powerful bird of prey on the Iberian Peninsula. Since ancient times, it has been a symbol of courage and power because of its strength, size, and grandeur. The golden eagle. This majestic bird's diet includes not only foxes, but also a wide variety of mammals, birds, and even reptiles. And although this formidable hunter prefers fresh meat, when its stomach growls, it's less picky and won't hesitate to eat any carrion it may come across. Adult golden eagles mostly display very dark brownish coloring, with more golden tones on the wings, back of the head, and neck. On the Iberian Peninsula, golden eagles inhabit most of the mountainous areas, almost always building their nests on rocky cliffs and ledges. The Mediterranean forest wouldn't be the same without the next species represented on Ignacio Lucas's drinking horn. With its thick and woolly fur, round head, large brown eyes, short tail, and long ears, the European rabbit or coney is an essential prey in the diet of more than 20 species of Iberian predators, some of which are heavily dependent on them, like the Iberian lynx and the Spanish imperial eagle. Weighing about 1.5 kilos, rabbits aren't very finicky when it comes time to choosing what to eat. They adapt to whatever is available according to the habitat and the time of year. The European rabbit, which is native to the Iberian Peninsula, is a very fertile species, which has made it a serious environmental problem in some of the countries where it has been introduced by man because of the absence of natural predators and rivals. Rabbits are herbivores that above all eat grassy plants. But when these are harder to find, they have no trouble eating all kinds of woody plants, flowers and fruits, and even the bark of trees and shrubs. What's more, rabbits' digestive systems are equipped for cecotrophy, which involves re-ingesting their feces so that they go through a second digestion, thus extracting the maximum amount of nutrients and water from their food. In the presence of a potential predator, this little rabbit stays motionless in an attempt to go unseen until the danger goes away. Among the drawings in Ignacio Lucas's field notebook, there is a scene that could be interpreted as another of the birds of prey found on the Iberian Peninsula catching a rabbit. With its characteristic silhouette featuring a deeply forked tail, this mid-sized bird was once very common in the Mediterranean forest. Red kites are beautiful birds with a gray head and a reddish body marked by numerous dark stripes. Despite their extraordinary ability in executing all sorts of aerial maneuvers and acrobatics, their predatory skills are rather limited. So when it's time to hunt, they aim for prey that is easily caught, such as small, sick, or inexperienced animals. Nevertheless, they tend to be scavengers, so it is easy to watch them flying low to the ground in search of the remains of animals that are already dead. Although we often associate the Mediterranean forest with dry summer weather, during much of the year water is found there in abundance. In order to provide water for domestic animals, humans have created numerous ponds by taking advantage of superficial springs, ponds where many wild species have found the ideal place to live. On the old horn, a new bird appears with an unmistakable shape. Standing more than 90 centimeters high and weighing 2 kilos, this large and formidable bird appears with a fish caught in its beak. Grey herons are easy to observe, whether flying or standing on the banks of rivers and ponds as they wait for prey to swim by so that they can catch them with their powerful beaks. Although fish are their most basic food, their opportunistic nature allows grey herons to eat a much broader diet that includes a great variety of vertebrates, such as amphibians, reptiles, crustaceans, and even the chicks of other birds and small mammals. The grey heron's hunting technique consists of keeping stock still, in wait, until some distracted prey passes nearby. Once the prey is within range, one sudden and precise movement of the bird's neck makes it very hard for its prey to escape its fate. Nonetheless, the grey heron's jabbing lance doesn't always hit the mark. Next to a bird that is not found in our shepherd's field notebook, we observe another that requires spending a little more time observing it in order to figure out what species it is. With a rounded head, a relatively short beak, and large yellow legs, this small long-legged bird is related to the waders. The Eurasian Stone-Curlew lives on the high prairies over a fairly large part of the Iberian Peninsula. Stone-Curlews are hard to observe because of their subtle coloring and their elusive and nocturnal habits. Active at twilight and during the night, these birds live in a wide variety of open habitats in the parts of Spain with a drier climate, whether wastelands, high prairies, or farmland. These wary birds tend to conceal their presence, easily hiding thanks to the camouflage of their brownish feathers. They mostly feed on insects such as grasshoppers and crickets, beetles, ants, and other small invertebrates. On rare occasions, they also catch small reptiles, which they stalk and hunt in quick pursuit. And if the opportunity presents itself, they can also catch mice, shrews, and even other birds' chicks. Finally, a drawing appears on our drinking horn of an animal that appears to straddle the real and the mythological, as if taken from a medieval bestiary, and whose image doesn't look like any animal that we know. Nevertheless, we know what species it is because for once, Inacio Lucas wrote the name of this mysterious creature in his magnificent bestiary. Bear. Bears were known to populate the central mountain system since the Middle Ages. But in the late 17th century, due mainly to overhunting, bears disappeared from these mountains, so Inacio Lucas couldn't have seen a bear in the wild in the late 19th century. Likewise, it should be noted that the drawing he produced isn't realistic. The tail and legs are too long, the body is too elongated, the ears are too big. This depiction must be the result of stories that he had heard. Stories that almost certainly were told to him by transhuman shepherds who in the summer drove their sheep north from the parched plains of Castile to the green and nutritious pastures of the Cantabrian mountain range. Frequently, and usually just before sundown, they saw bears emerging from the dense beech, oak, and birch forests in search of food. Bears are omnivorous, and although they can kill animals that are quite large, they prefer to eat plants, and for that reason, the shepherds that frequented the mountains in the north of the peninsula weren't as afraid of them as they were of wolves. Bears have a good sense of smell and good hearing, but their eyesight is poor, especially if something is far away. Burly and muscular, bears can measure 2 meters long and weigh up to 180 kilos in the case of a fairly large male. Although their claws and general anatomy project the image of a typical carnivore, in reality, bears only occasionally eat meat. But that's no impediment for large males to kill and eat other bears' cubs. A big male is approaching. The female, nervous because she knows that males sometimes kill those cubs that they didn't father, leads her cub to a safe place. While the she-bear tries to drive the male away from the spot where she hid her cub, instinct tells her little one that it had better get to safety by climbing as high as it can up a tree trunk. The male doesn't show much interest, however, and he walks away with some other aim in mind. Once the danger has passed, it's time to join Mummy again. Fortunately for the cub and its mother, the male is following the trail of another female in heat. The stories of bears and wolves, genets and martens, kites and herons were engraved forever in the memory of this humble countryman, who no doubt came to know his surroundings very deeply. Like the primitive hunter-gatherer peoples, he captured these surroundings in a simple way, using the natural means that he had close at hand. Horns were one of the supports most preferred by men who lived in the open country to prove their artistic abilities and to express their conception of reality. This reality shows us the profound relationships between wild animals, domestic animals, and mankind. Which is not surprising, as we are all fellow travelers on this fascinating journey called life. Some people say that a person disappears forever when their name is forgotten. But the spirit and experiences of Inacio Lucas will always stay with us thanks to this lovely artifact, a paragon of rustic art that to our great good fortune has survived to our days.